Today we are gonna start with Firebase with Flutter, and rest now I'll ask Sharna Didi to take over.
Hello everyone. Good evening everyone. I hope you all are doing fine. So, how was your day? So that's Sunday and what have you guys been doing? That's great. Enjoying holidays. Anime, nice. Okay, so let's get started with Firebase with Flutter. By the way, how many of you guys tried something on their own after yesterday's session? Yesterday we discussed about material widgets, we discussed about state management. So did you successfully build? Yeah, was just one person who said me. Okay, I guess we can proceed. E-commerce app and apps like WhatsApp using Flutter. Oh, that's great. Extended gave the bar red color. That's nice. It's some errors, but after that solve them. That's very good. Few. Okay, let's start with Firebase with Flutter. That's today's topic. Moving to the next slide. This is what Flutter Festivals is all about. It's a community-led event series where developers can join and learn fundamentals of these Google technologies featuring Flutter, Firebase, and Google Cloud content. So we have already done a little bit of Firebase, Flutter. So today we are starting Firebase, and tomorrow we'll be maybe covering the Google Cloud part. Moving to the next slide. So what exactly is Flutter? Yes, we have already discussed this, and these are the foundational pillars. These were covered in the first session, the intro session, that Flutter is fast, productive, you can build beautiful user interfaces. It's completely open source. That means anybody can edit it, anybody can modify it and contribute to the code base itself. And you can create modules and packages and transport your code to every type of project. And not just for project, this is valid for building cross-platform applications. So a single code base can be used for all types of apps, including Android, iOS, web, desktop, which has Windows, Mac, as well as Linux. Moving ahead, what exactly is Firebase? Yep. What is Firebase? Firebase helps you build and run successful apps. But what exactly it is? Firebase is a database management system. You are partially correct. It's not just a database management system. It's not just an SQL. It's a NoSQL management system. And yes, it is a BaaS. That means backend as a service. And if you are familiar with other Android development, web development, you might have probably used Firebase already. And the same thing goes, the same Firebase can be used for building applications in Flutter as well. So if you are providing user interfaces through Flutter, that's the front end of the app, you can provide a complete backend using Firebase. Firebase has lot of features. Yes, app hosting is one of them, and database, it's a NoSQL database. For all those who don't know what NoSQL is, it means it's not only SQL. It's not that there is no SQL in that. Don't get confused in that way. NoSQL basically means not only SQL. So what can Firebase be used for? It's used to build better apps. How? Let's see. First, with authentication services that Firebase provides. That is the sign in with email, sign in with Gmail, sign in with mobile number. All these features are provided by Firebase. We can have hosting services, as you said, for website hosting, app hosting. All these are available in Firebase. We can have cloud functionalities, the ML kit, all these functionalities that you normally see when you are using G Cloud. Many of you must have already enrolled in the Google Cloud programs and have seen the cloud functions, right? All those functionalities, I mean, some of them that are integratable with Firebase are available with Firebase. Then there are database management system that includes real-time database as well as Cloud Firestore and cloud storage that are available with Firebase. This will give like a complete package for your application. Also, Firebase not only just helps you build better apps, it also helps to improve your quality of your app, which includes crash analytics, performance monitoring, and test tab. And it also helps to grow your apps by using analytics, by using predictions. You can configure remote configurations. There is cloud messaging services. There are dynamic links and in-app messaging. In-app messagings are used like if you want to communicate with your customers from within the application. These in-app applications can be used. Moving ahead, these are some of the features that Firebase provides. Firebase is only for front end. No, Firebase is for backend mainly, not just for front end. It's mainly for backend. We have Flutter for front end part, and Firebase can be used as backend. Let's move ahead. So, Firebase with Flutter. So, what exactly can we do with Flutter when we integrate Firebase? We can integrate. These are some of the most common things that almost everyone who uses Firebase with Flutter has at least these integrated in their application. First one is authentication, that is login, sign in, sign up. These functionalities. It also includes sign up with mobile number included. Then we have Firebase database, that is and Firebase storage, that is for storing any type of data ranging from images, music files, audio files, or any other extension. All these can be stored in the Firebase database. We also have Firebase messaging, that is for in-app messaging services. So we'll be looking at how we set up Firebase with Flutter in your application very soon. Let's move ahead. So these are prerequisites. That what's on the screen is for Android. It's mainly for iOS and macOS people. So the preferred IDE or editor, that's Android Studio or Visual Studio, as you had set up yesterday. And just a second. Yeah, I'm sorry for the disturbance. You should have a preferred IDE setup, and you should have the Flutter app that targets these are configurations for iOS and for developing in Mac desktop applications or iOS devices. The same thing when it comes to Android, the minimum required SDK version is 19. That is set by default, so you don't have to change anything. And for setting up physical device or simulator for running your app, you should be able to set it up like we all did these things yesterday. And for cloud messaging, to completely you need to complete the following tasks for setting up. In an Apple device, you should set up a physical device. You should obtain Apple push notification authentication key from your developer account and enable the push notification in Xcode. So moving ahead, we also have for all other the prerequisites for all other Firebase products. You can use either physical device or a simulator, and you need to have the Flutter installed for your specific operating system, which includes the Flutter SDK, the libraries if needed, and the platform specific softwares and SDKs. Like for iOS, you should have Xcode installed, all these things. And you also need to have a Google account so that you can create a Firebase setup. And if you don't have a Flutter app, you can complete the getting started to create a new Flutter app and your preferred IDE so that you can set up. Moving ahead, uh, for implementation of the Firebase project, you need to create a Firebase project in your cloud console, I mean your Firebase console, and then you need to connect to the app. I'll be showing a short demo of it if possible, like at the end, on creating the Firebase project and setting up in the Flutter app. So yeah, we have the docs in the chat box here shared by Suraj. You can look into it. Moving on. So to register your app with Firebase, these are platforms specific for iOS, for developing Flutter and iOS application. The slide what's there on the screen. So in the center of your Firebase console, you need to click on iOS plus icon to launch the setup workflow. If you've already added your app to the Firebase, you need to click on Add App to display the platform options. You need to enter Apple ID in your iOS bundle field, find the bundle ID in your project, and you need to set up top level app in the project navigator, then access the general tab. And as I'll be showing some demo in Android, so these are for people who are using Mac OS and for debugging, that's why we are having it on this slide. You need to have an app nickname. This is completely optional field. It's just for your convenience to identify which app this is, and it's only visible to you or the people who are using your console, so you don't have to worry about it. You will have an app store ID used by Firebase dynamic links to redirect users to your app store, and by Google Analytics to import conversions event. If your app doesn't have any Apple Store ID, you can add it later on. So if this is just for registration of your Firebase project and to get started with the iOS development. This is the second step. Next, we have, moving ahead, you need to download this file to obtain your Apple platform config files, and you need to add it to your project in the required path. Especially, you need to add it in the file into the runner directory of your Flutter app, and you have to use Xcode for the same. And if your project, like rather than moving to any other editor, it's preferred to open it through Xcode. In this way, file will also stay connected to your Xcode project. And back to your Firebase console, you can set up workflow, click on next, and skip the remaining step. Moving ahead, to add plugins to your Flutter app. Okay, so yesterday we probably didn't cover this fact. How many of you checked out the pubspec.yaml file in yesterday's tutorial? There was something we mentioned about pubspec, but we didn't probably explain everything about it. So pubspec.yaml is the file through which for the desired app in a modular form, so that when you use a particular plugin, you need to add it to your pubspec.yaml so that you can run your application smoothly. Also, there are certain things while adding dependencies. If when you're taking some dependency from pub.dev, you need to add it under the dev part of your YAML files, and not under the dev dependency. Dev dependencies are mainly used for when you that are mandatory even for the app to compile. But dependencies are only for having certain functionalities in your app running. So this is the difference. So, and you need to add Flutterfire plugins, and you can use these plugins. There are many of them for each of the Firebase functionalities, platform-specific functionalities such as Firebase APIs, plugins including platform-specific code to access services and APIs on each platform. Firebase is accessed through a number of different libraries. For example, there is real-time database, there is authentication, there is analytics or cloud storage. So Flutter provides a set of Firebase plugins which collectively called Flutterfire, and you can check this in the docs. We'll provide you the link very soon. And you anytime you use these in your project, you will have to use the latest version to have it bug free. We have one question in the chat that says, is Firebase the only backend available? No, Firebase is the most common backend available. That's for Flutter apps. There are other backend services. You can use anything. You can use AWS, you can use Azure, you can use anything for Flutter app. It doesn't really matter. The thing is, Firebase is by Google, Flutter is by Google, so that's why we prefer. Moving ahead, this is how we are actually going to add dependencies in the YAML file. So we now have a small video by on your screen. You'll see it shortly.
Hi there, Flutter developers. Interested in adding the power of Firebase to your Flutter apps? Well, you've come to the right place. Let's find out how on this episode of Firecasts. So I'm going to assume that you already have a Flutter app that is up and running that you want to work with. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to use the basic counter app that you get by default when you create a new Flutter project, but you can follow along with just about any Flutter app that you've already got built. The process should be the same. Now, there are 4 steps to getting the Firebase platform up and running. Number 1, creating a project in the Firebase console and adding our Flutter apps to that project. Number 2, downloading a few constants files and adding them to your Flutter project. Number 3, installing the SDKs. And then number 4, initializing the Firebase platform in your code. As an Android developer, you might be used to using the Android Studio Firebase Assistant to get Firebase running in your app. Now, we're not going to be doing that here. It's going to be a little more manual, but not to worry. Just follow along with me and we'll get this built together. So the first thing I'm going to do is head on over to the console at firebase.google.com/console to create a new Firebase project. Now, when you first visit the Firebase console, you'll see a few options here for what to do next. Depending on your situation, you might see a list of existing Firebase projects, or you might just have an Add Project button. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click that because I want to create a new project. And before we go any further, let me take a moment to explain the difference between projects and apps. So a project can contain one or more platform-specific apps. Now, all apps in the same project use the same Cloud Firestore, real-time database, and auth backends, and you can view combined analytics data across all apps in the same project. You can also use features like Firebase Cloud Messaging or in-app messaging to talk to all of your apps at once. You don't have to, but you can, which is sometimes convenient. So in general, if you have different versions of the same app running on different platforms, such as Android and iOS, you'll want to add each of those apps to the same Firebase project. On the other hand, if your apps really are different, then you should put those in different Firebase projects. And for those of you building like multi-tenant apps, we generally recommend using a separate Firebase project for each of your customers in order to keep their data nicely separated. Now, if you're building a Flutter app, you're probably doing this so that you can have the same app running on both iOS and Android. So what we're going to do is create a single Firebase project, and then we'll attach both versions of our Flutter app. And for now, I am just sticking to the iOS and Android versions of our app, since web support at the time of this recording is still a little experimental and subject to change, but maybe I'll add that in a future video. So I'm going to create a new project here. I can give it a name, although you'll notice I also have this drop-down box beneath the name. This gives me the option to add Firebase features onto any existing Google Cloud projects I have access to. Now, if you do this, this will keep all the capabilities of your existing Google Cloud project while adding in some of the new services needed for Firebase. So if you are working on a project that you've already set up through Google Cloud, make sure you pick that. Don't create a new Firebase project. In my case, though, I am starting a brand new project, so I'm just going to type in a new name. You can see here it's giving me a little ID string here, which will get updated as I type. This is the project ID, which is a globally unique identifier for your project across both Firebase and Google Cloud. It's not public facing, so don't worry too much if you see random characters at the end or anything. Now I'm going to click on the continue button. And now I get to choose whether or not to add Google Analytics to my project. Enabling analytics will allow me to use a number of useful features such as A/B testing, better remote config targeting, and getting crash-free user reports. If I don't enable analytics, I won't be able to use those features. It's totally optional and you can add it later, so go with whatever works for you. Personally, I'm going to keep analytics enabled. Now, if you do, you're going to need to associate this project with an analytics account. Now, an account isn't an account like a Gmail account or anything. It's really just like a folder of analytics projects, and it's mostly there for organizational purposes. Some developers like to have separate accounts for each project. Me, I like to have this default one for all of my test projects, so that's where this is going. Now I can proceed to the next step, which is actually creating the project. Firebase will think for a few moments, and then I will have a shiny new project to work with. Okay, the next step is adding both the Android and the iOS versions of my Flutter app to this project. So let's start with the Android version. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Android icon here, and I have a few fields to fill out. So first up is adding my Android package name, also known as your application ID. If you don't remember what this is, you can look it up in Android Studio by going to your Android app build.gradle file and scrolling down here to where it says application ID. And actually, while we're here, I have heard from some of our engineers that you're going to be much better off if you can set your min SDK version to 21 or later so that you don't run into a number of methods limit later on. So I'm going to do that. At the time of this recording, this will still be compatible with like 94.1% of all devices out there in the world. So I think that's a reasonable trade-off. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and grab my application ID here, and I can paste that back into the dialog box. Now, this app nickname, it's strictly internal and just a way of identifying my app in a user-friendly way in the Firebase console. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Amazing Counter Android. Finally, I'm being asked to optionally add the SHA-1 hash of my debug signing certificate so my app can kind of prove that it belongs to me. Yeah, that's an oversimplification. Go check out the docs for a real answer. Now, note that this is optional. It's really only used in a few situations like Firebase Dynamic Links and Google Sign-In, so you can leave it out and provide it later in your Firebase project settings. In fact, I kind of recommend leaving this out until you need it. This is because you can't have the same combination of package name and SHA-1 hash in more than one place anywhere in Firebase. And so if you or somebody else on your project team ends up registering your app in like a test project with your shared production key, and then decide you want to register it in a different project later on, you're going to have to hunt down that original project and delete the signature, and that may be kind of a hassle, particularly if a lot of folks in your company have access to that SHA-1. I've heard stories from our support people, and this happens more often than you think. So you know what? I'm not even going to touch this right now. If you do want to add that in, follow the instructions in this link here. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next step, which is to download this JSON file. I'm going to download Google services.json by clicking this button. Do make sure it doesn't have like a 1 in parentheses after it if you're like me and download a lot of Google services files. And then next, I'm going to drag it into my Android project. You should in your Android/app folder, kind of like this. Now, if we look at this file, you can see that it basically contains a bunch of constants that the Firebase SDK needs to configure itself correctly. It's got the name of my project, the cloud storage bucket I might use, some OAuth client IDs, and so on. Now, none of this is really secret, but you should really only share this file with your team. If you're making like an open source demo app to be shared publicly, you'll probably want anybody who runs their project to generate their own version of this file to hook up to their. Now, in my case, I'm not sharing this app publicly. This is just for me and my team, so I could check it into my personal Git repository if I had one. Okay, next, we're being told to make a few Gradle changes. In a sort of somewhat unusual move, the first change we need to make is in our project level Gradle file. So let me open this one in Android, build.gradle. And first I'm going to confirm that Google is listed in my build script repositories and in my all projects repositories, and it is. Then I'll copy this line into my dependencies section to make sure that we are using this plugin here. And by the way, all you experienced Android developers, don't confuse this with Google Play services. This Google Services plugin is really just used to parse that JSON file we added. We really only need it to initialize our app. Okay, next up, let's open up our app level Gradle file. That's this one under Android app build.gradle. And this is where I apply that Google Services plugin in my app Gradle file, which I can do by copying and pasting this line here into my file alongside all these other apply plugin lines. But you can ignore these lines here about like importing the Firebase bill of materials or the analytics library. Yes, in a normal Android project, this would also be where we would install and activate our other Firebase libraries. And the bill of materials is sort of a nice way of doing that in a version safe way. But in a Flutter app, we're going to save that for our pubspec.yaml file at a later point. By the way, the documentation also tells us that this would be a good time to run Flutter pub get. Honestly, I don't think that's necessary here since we haven't changed anything in our pubspec file, but I guess it never hurts. So go ahead and run it if you really want, but I think it's probably superfluous. Okay, next we can go ahead and skip the rest of these dialogues in the Firebase console. And that's Android taken care of. All right, next up, let's get our iOS app set up too. So to get our iOS app added to this project, I'm going to click this Add App button and then select the iOS logo. Now, be careful. You might think your iOS bundle ID is the same as your Android application ID, but it often isn't. iOS likes to use camel case while Android prefers underscores. So let's be safe and open up our generated iOS project in Xcode and find out for sure. So from Android Studio, I'm going to select Tools, and then Flutter, and then Open iOS Module in Xcode. I'll wait a moment. And now that I'm here, let me look at my runner project, and I'll select the runner target. And here we can find my bundle identifier. Okay, so let me copy and paste this bundle identifier into my dialog here. For app nickname, again, just pick anything vaguely user-friendly. I'll probably stick with Amazing Counter iOS here. Okay, next up, they're asking for your App Store ID. Now, if you were to use dynamic links, this would be used to send users to the correct App Store page if a user clicks on a dynamic link and doesn't have your app installed. It's optional, and you can totally add it in later if you don't have an App Store ID at the moment. In my case, I don't have an App Store ID for my Amazing Counter app, so I'm just going to leave this blank. So I will click Register App, and now I can download the Google Service Info plist file. Now, again, watch that the file that gets downloaded doesn't have a number in parentheses after it. This does tend to happen more often in the iOS world. And if it does, just do a little file renaming to make sure it's just called Google Service Info.plist. Okay, next, we're going to drag this file into Xcode. Yes, really Xcode, not Android Studio. I think you can put it anywhere in your project, but the docs recommend sticking it inside your runner folder like this. Now make sure copy items if needed is checked, and then go ahead and click OK. And then you can ignore the rest of the setup wizard in the Firebase console. Like, don't worry about adding new CocoaPods or anything. The Flutter build tools will take care of that for you later. Okay, we are done with the Firebase console for now, and even better, done with all of our platform-specific work. So you can close Xcode and all those Android Gradle files. Let's move on to the next step, and that's installing the libraries. Now, honestly, this step is pretty straightforward if you've installed any Flutter packages before. Just remember that to keep your app nice and thin, you should really only install the libraries for features that you need. In fact, you'll probably notice that there is no all-encompassing Firebase package that installs everything for you. You're going to need to install each individual feature separately, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to head on over to the firebase.flutter.dev site. And here you can find a full list of these packages, what platforms they support, links to source code, along with their entries on pub.dev, which is kind of nice. Now, it's important to point out that this one here, Firebase Core, is the basic library that you're going to need to install no matter what else you're using. This is the library that does all the initialization and setup work for you. So if you don't have this, nothing else will work. So we're going to install that one first. Now, these are basically installed the way any other Flutter package is. You can jump on over to the page on pub.dev, head over to the installing section, and copy and paste this line into your pubspec.yaml file in Flutter down here in the dependencies section. And, as always, make sure those spaces line up. You only want 2 here. So we're done installing Firebase Core, but since I guess I want to see our app actually do something, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to install, say, the real-time database. So I'll go back to that firebase.flutter.dev page, and I'll do the same thing here. Obviously, these version numbers may look different than when you're doing this. Just go ahead with whatever version is listed on the site. And once you do all this, you'll want to do a Flutter pub get. So yes, Android Studio, thanks for the suggestion. Let's run that. Okay, so if we were to run this now, our app should still be in a good working state, but it won't look or behave any different than before since we haven't actually done anything with a Firebase library yet. So let's do that next. Now, as a general rule, you'll want to initialize the Firebase library before you do anything else in your app. That makes sure Firebase is ready to do things like process session start events and analytics, process incoming dynamic links, or sign your user in. So in our main.dart file, before we even call run app, I'm going to call await firebase.initializeApp. And let's also import Firebase Core so that we don't get an error. This await call basically tells Flutter to not go ahead and start our app until we're done initializing Firebase, which should happen very quickly. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised it's even an asynchronous method here, but I guess we need to do that since we're calling out to native processes. But because this is an await call, Flutter is going to complain that we're putting it inside a function that's not marked asynchronous. So I can just Alt-Enter and select Add Async Modifier, and Android Studio fixes this up nicely for me. So let's do a full restart here. I often like doing that if I'm messing with main. And you can see that I'm now getting this weird exception around how services binding.default binary messenger was accessed before the binding was initialized. So I don't entirely know what's happening here, but I'm guessing somewhere in the Firebase initialization code, it's trying to access this default binary messenger object, which itself hasn't quite finished initializing yet. And so we're running into some kind of race condition. Luckily, the error message tells us exactly how to fix it, which is to explicitly call widgets flutter binding.ensure initialized first. So that's easy enough. We'll copy and paste it into here, restart my app again, and it works. And this is nice, but I'm not a big fan of this blocking await call right here. While Firebase generally initializes quickly, I don't like having your app do nothing while we're waiting for an asynchronous call. So I think the best thing to do here is to use a future builder. As you may know, a future is basically a placeholder for an asynchronous operation that will complete sometime in the future. It's kind of like an async task in Android land or a promise in JavaScript. And you can check out Andrew's video in the link below for more info. And a future builder is, to oversimplify a little bit, a widget that builds another widget once a future has completed. It also conveniently lets you create an intermediary widget, like say a loading screen, resolve. So let's do that here. I'm going to remove this initialize call here. And down here in my app, I'll set up final Firebase app underscore FB app equal to Firebase initialize app, and I'll remove the await call. Android Studio will complain that FB app should be a future that resolves to Firebase app, so we can fix that here. And then what I'll do down here in my build call is to keep this material app, but for my home widget, I'm going to use a future builder. So for the future property here, I will specify FB app. This is telling the future builder what future I want to be monitoring. And then for my builder, well, this is the callback that gets called initially, but then also gets called when there's a change in the state of my future, either when there's an error or it's been completed. So what I can do here is check and see. If there's an error, well, let's print out the error to the console and I will return a very basic error screen. You'll probably want to do something a little nicer than this, but you get the idea. Otherwise, we'll check and see if our snapshot has data is true. If it is, well, that probably means that the future has been resolved properly and Firebase has been properly initialized. So I'm going to go ahead and return the original my homepage widget. And then otherwise, I will return the indicator. Okay, there. Now I feel like we have a properly initialized app. So let's run this and, well, my app is running, but it still looks the same as before. How can we tell that we have Firebase actually working properly? Well, if we were to look in the logcat while running the Android version of our app and filter for the word Firebase, you should hopefully see this line here about how Firebase app initialization was successful. And so at this point, you are pretty much ready to go. But if you want to see something a little more exciting than a line of debug text in your console, I'm going to do some quick hacking in the next 60 seconds to get some basic real-time database functionality working. Remember, I already went ahead and added the real-time database in my pubspec.yaml file earlier. So let's see, here's what we're going to do. In my increment counter method, before we call setState, let's create a database reference by saying that database reference underscore testref equals Firebase database.instance.reference to get a reference to our real-time database. And then we'll call child to hit a child node that we will call, say, test. And then let's just set that to a value of hello world followed by a random number. I'm going to just confirm that dart.math and the real-time database libraries were imported, and they were. So I think that should do it. So we can hot reload, click the button, and whoops, well, we're getting some kind of permission denied error. Oh, I know, I forgot to enable the database in the Firebase project. So I'm going to head on over to the console. I will jump to the real-time database tab and say, yes, I really do want to create a database. We'll start out in test mode, which means everybody can access our database, which is a terrible idea, but will work for now. And now when I click the button, hey, look at that. There's a value changing the database. That's very exciting. Now, again, this was super quick and dirty, and we will hopefully create a tutorial in the near future on how to properly use the real-time database in your application. But it's good to know we have Firebase working and connected to a real backend. All right. So now that you have Firebase properly set up and initialized in your code, there is lots more you can do. You can store, query, and sync data from the cloud using either the real-time database or Cloud Firestore. And I recommend checking out the database picker in our documentation if you're wondering which one is right for you. You can use Firebase Auth to easily sign in your users from a variety of sign-in providers. You can record events and user properties in analytics to find out what your users are really doing in your app, and combine that with remote config to run A/B tests or personalize your app for different groups of users. You can add services like Crashlytics so you can find out exactly where your app is crashing and why, and so much more. In fact, you know what? Let me know in the comments below which features you most want to see, and I'll see if I can work on those first for future episodes of Firecasts. And of course, if you want to find out more, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? You can also check out the documentation at firebase.flutter.dev and play around with any of our sample apps. So have fun creating, and I will see you soon on another episode of Firecasts.
Okay, so that was a video demo of how Firebase works with Flutter and in Android as well as iOS devices. So yeah, for the next steps after you've seen the video, you can check out the Flutterfy plugins. I have just put out the list in the chat box 3 minutes ago. There are Flutter Code Labs. We can provide you the link because the Firebase systems keep changing they are constantly getting updated. So there might be a probability that what's shown on the code labs may not work, but you can surely figure it out through Stack Overflow. And they are also like continuously updating this code lab, so you may or may not get those errors because this is a backend integration, and without errors, what is the fun in developing anyway? And you can also prepare to launch your app, set up budget alerts for your app in your cloud Google Cloud Console. You can monitor the usage and billing dashboard in the Firebase console, and you can also review the Firebase launch checklist. You can explore more with the code labs for Flutter. You can check out the articles by the Flutter community. You can check out the documentation, Firebase documentation, and the YouTube videos that gives that's more of tutorials and many more. I can show you a short demo of setting up Firebase console and how it looks like. I can share my screen and show you. Yeah, just a second. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, just a minute. Opening the Firebase tab. So this is the Firebase console. You can access your own console with this link. You can sign in and you need to create a project. As explained in the video, there is difference between project and app. I hope you guys had paid attention. So if you want to have if you want to actually add to your existing Google Cloud project, you can add, or if you want to create a new project, you can create a new project from here. There are 3 steps that are to be followed. You can give any name, like my demo app. I'm just creating it, and you can click on continue. You may or may not like this is an optional feature, though recommended, to enable Google Analytics for the project. And enabling analytics will allow you to use a number of useful features such as A/B testing, better remote configuration targeting, and gathering crash analytics for user reports. So these are the benefits of using Google Analytics. It's completely optional. So okay, maybe I'll just let it happen as leaving it to the default. Clicking on continue, you can select the default account. You don't have to create new account for every project. All your analytics will stay together, and you can check it out based on your project in your analytics console. You can click on create project to create a new project. There are some limitations on number of projects you can create. So as I have already created quite a lot of project, I'm just going to open one of them to show you the demo. Okay, not this one. I'll just click on something else. To get through the iOS divisions of the application as explained, you can click on the iOS and set up what according to what was told in the video, and for same goes with the Android. You can set up by clicking on the Android tab. To get the package name for the Android, you can find it in your build.gradle file within your app folder. I'll show you that as well in a while. And these are for Unity. I mean, we are not working with Unity, so you can completely ignore that. And if you're setting up Firebase for Flutter Web, you need to configure it through web. At the time the video was made, web was not stable, and now that web apps are stable with Firebase and Flutter, you can configure web app as well. So coming on to the fact of sharing through Android, I'm just sharing my screen and showing you what are the changes that you'll have to make. My Android Studio is loading, so just a second. You can always check out the documentation for the actual version of the Firebase, and the documentation will have the current versions of how to proceed with everything, because what the videos may show or what the projects that you clone might show may be different from what that is currently existing. So to get the what do you call this, the app package name for Android, you can find it in Android in the Android folder of your app. You can open the app folder and you'll get a build.gradle file, and in that you'll find something called application ID, mostly in the line 47 of your application, and there you will get your application ID, and this is the package name. While when you created a new Flutter project, if you create a new Flutter project, you actually have an option to change the package name. So if you have set some custom name here, that's what people prefer. You could have had that here as well. Like for example, the organization here, it shows .com.example. That's what I've left it as default. That is the reason why any project I create will have com.example in the build.gradle file. So if I change this and create a new project, I'll have that particular organization in my build.gradle. And after the uh, organization, we'll have the name of the project mostly. That's the package name. And that's how the platform works. And also you need to download the Google services.json, after which what they call it as download.config file. You'll get the file in here, and you can download it from here and place it in the app folder of your inside the app folder within the Android in the application. So that's all about Google services. You don't have to change anything. Only thing, if you are with the latest version of Flutter, you may have to change the minimum SDK version to 19 or above. I've kept it as 21 for my emulator to work. Well, that is optional, but you should at least have it 19 for successful running of your application. Now in Android, when you create a new Flutter project, it will show Flutter dot target minimum SDK version as what's specified on line 48. You may change it to a numerical value. These are set up in local properties. You don't have to change anything from there. And in build.gradle within the Android folder, not the app level, but the Android level build.gradle, you will have to add the class path and the dependencies. These lines are all shown up very well when you create the Firebase project. So if I just okay, I've just my tab shared. If I share my whole window, probably see that. Okay, so if you are registering a project and just a second, guys. I took out the app build.gradle. I took out the name out of as Firebase demo. I'm not creating an Android project though. I already have a Firebase connected with this. I put it up here. Nickname, it's optional, and I'm going to put demo app in here. SHA certification is an optional feature. It was covered in the video on its advantages. If you click on register app, it's going to show you a config file. You need to download this, and if you click on next, you're going to get these plugins with the instruction on where to do what to do. Like if you need to check the following line if it's there, so that particular line can be found in Android build.gradle. You have all projects Google and repository level Google. Yes, you checked. And after that, all these instructions you will get it when you create a new project itself. So you don't have to worry about it while creating the application. So that's how the Firebase is, the console looks like. I just created a demo application for you all to view. For the code, you can refer. Yeah, today we didn't do any hands-on session, so there aren't any code for the same. But you can check out the code labs as provided by Suraj in the chat links. You can check out each one of them for knowing the latest version. So that was all for today's session. We are open to question and answer.
Use question and answer tab at the above behind general to for your questions.
And as per many people asking me in DMs for my contact details, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I've already provided you the links the first day itself. And as for the attendance link, the link is already pinned on the chat. You can refer it to fill out the attendance. I prefer questions based on Firebase or Flutter if you have any. Or if any of you want to demo any of the apps that you guys made with using Flutter alone, like after yesterday's session, you may also give out the links or anything so that we can come to know that, yeah, you guys did really, these sessions were actually impactful. The recorded video will be uploaded on the YouTube channel after the campaign is over. Do subscribe to GDSC LPU YouTube channel and click on the notification button so that you can come to know whenever we upload the video. Guys, if you have any question related to Flutter or Firebase, you can put it. We do have that this platform. We still have got 6 more minutes. Not just for Firebase, if you have any questions, Flutter also.
Yeah, it seems everyone has understood the concepts. So let's see for some videos, and then we can wrap up the session, right?
Yeah, sure.
You ever traveled somewhere and saw kids playing soccer? There's something really fascinating about how sport transcends all cultures, languages, history. Over the years, I've dabbled in every sport imaginable. I think that's part of the reason when I launched Push that I was absolutely inspired by how we can help athletes across all sports.
I've represented the British diving team since 2015, competing at European and world level. This is really where fine margins make all the difference, which is why I started using Push.
Push is an advanced strength training wearable. Part of our mission is to optimize athletic training, making sure that when an athlete is walking into the gym, they're actually getting the most that their body can afford to give that day.
Push gives me rep by rep feedback in real time, so my lifting becomes more flexible and efficient, which helps me improve my strength as a diver.
We were constantly getting
Suraj,
requests for expert support.
And we do have
One of
one
our
question
challenges
from
is that
in Q&A.
we that
Maybe we
trying
can
to
do that
support.
first. It says, what is the package manager in Flutter? And package manager for Flutter is pub, and it's mainly package manager for Dart language, and it contains all the reusable libraries and packages which can be added to our app, and in general for any of the Dart programs. So that is what pub means, and that is the package manager. Yeah, kind of. Yes.
Two different code bases, it was going to be super difficult. With Flutter, we are able to save roughly a day a week in just syncing two different code bases. It's really enabled us to push out a lot more features a lot faster. Being a wearable, we really needed to make sure that the Bluetooth connection was going to be robust and reliable, that it can handle any type of data transfer that we need. And we were blown away by just how performant Flutter was. We really wanted to make sure that our technology can scale and can help impact athletes' lives at various levels of development. And that's something that I'm really proud of.
Push gives me motivation to see how far I can go and what I can achieve. That ultimately means the Olympics.
You ever traveled somewhere and
Okay, that's it for the day. I guess we are on time. It's 8. And thank you all for joining, right? And stay connected with us for the next day link. And just guess what will be the link for tomorrow's. Someone drop in the chat. Let's be interactive at the end. Yeah, just remember the link pattern, and accordingly we will meet. And let's just poll how many of you are around university or in university you want hybrid event or offline or online. Accordingly we can plan as well, and that will cover, you can say, a full session or like from basic to advanced, like that. And like that we can plan. Yeah, purely hands-on session. So the main idea is proper offline that will work, but we will ensure to use hybrid mode. There you can utilize as the online as well. But as I can see, most of you are in online mode. I'm not sure how many of you are joining offline, and that vibes need to be there, right, for offline thing. Yeah.
Most of the audience have never visited college, and that's probably why they are
Yep,
saying
yep.
online.
That's why I want to cover like in offline events, and the part it was in 2019. So just want to give you all vibes for offline events and hackathons and all further events planned, right? So let's see how it goes, and stay connected with us for further updates. And for now, this link will not work, FF4 activated soon. You can check our social media whenever the post will be posted. You can have a look. Else you will get a mail also whenever the event will be updated, as all the days you are receiving, right? So I hope the session is going great so far, and there are some surprises as well at the last. That is, you will get to know about that. That is something interesting. You all can join there, right? And that will be very insightful for your Flutter journey, right? So that's it for the day. I guess we can wrap up the session for the day. And yeah,
Thank you all for joining, and do join in tomorrow as well.
yeah, exactly. Thank you all.